Welcome to How to Cheat on Evaluations, part of the Really Dang Good Toastmaster series on RDG meetings. If you're here, I hope you're wanting to learn about evaluations, so let's get started. Let's wind back the clock to 2006, and I'm a pretty new Toastmaster, and I'm really enthusiastic, and so I sign up for the first contest I can, and that's evaluations. Now everything was like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And then I saw Ken had signed up to be the test speaker. And I knew I was in trouble. In fact, 22 seconds in, I felt like this. I think there was a vague sensation of having my notes taken away, and then my notes given back to me. And then I went up on the stage, and I was like, good speech, yeah! I came in dead last. I must have felt like I was in a cold sweat for 3.5 hours back then. It was just awful. And I don't want you guys to have that same experience. So, what does it look like in 2016? Well, I won my club level contest and I got to area. And there I won first place, being much more calm, much more confident, and just able to do the job. So what really changed in those 10 years? Well, 10 years is a lot of time. I spent a lot of time doing more evaluations, critiquing more speeches. You might think, oh, you read a bunch of books on speaking, you took a lot of audio programs, you did a lot of video stuff. Yeah, I did some of that, sure. Or you might think, you had a weird penguin sensei, or a teacher, or a coach. Yeah, I had some of that too. But I want to save you guys that pain. All that time, all that reading, all that weird fish getting time for penguins. And show you some ways that you can cut your learning time for evaluations dramatically. So you can get maybe in 6 months what I've gotten all these years. I want you to have those skills. Especially now that in Pathways, being an evaluator is one of the first projects you ever do, and it's very scary. I don't want you to go through that. You're going to be nervous, sure, but I want to cut that down. I want to cut down that learning curve for you, and that's what this video is going to be all about. So if you're interested in that, keep watching. All right, let's backtrack a little bit. What is the evaluator? What's kind of my philosophy? And if you're a speaker, you might think, well, they're the judge, they're the jury, and sometimes they're the executioner of your speech. And that can be a little heavy-handed, I know, it's jokey and such, and congratulations, you're coming along with me on this ride. It's just going to get worse from here. But really, though, once you get into it, when you're a good evaluator, I feel like you're really you're a mini mentor for those 3 or so minutes. You're a mini coach for those 3 or so minutes. And when you change your mindset and think of yourself as that for a speaker, I think you're going to have a much better experience as an evaluator. You have to really change your mindset to think, okay, not just how can I make this speech better, but how can I make this speaker better? And being an evaluator, yeah, it does require certain skills. It requires quick thinking, critical thought, ability to organize yourself quickly, come up with a speech quickly, and it will help your other speaking skills quite a bit. So it's definitely worth it. If you have an evaluation role open at your club meeting, take it. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so there's a set of trouble things, and you saw back in 2006, I had some serious mental roadblocks that were just stopping me from being effective. Let's talk about some of those, because I know a lot of people, they step into the role and they hit real hard. And I just want to give you guys a way to rethink the evaluator role so that you're not trapped in those same roadblocks like I was. All right, you may be thinking, the speaker's too advanced to me. I don't know how to do this. I don't have the right. I'll be scared. I'll insult them. They'll hate me. I won't be able to find anything. I'll say something incredibly mean. Oh. Just take a breath. It's okay. We're going to talk about how to adapt your attitude. Because it's not about you. It's about that speaker and how to make them better. If you can't find anything wrong, no big deal. It's fine. You are an evaluator, not a guru. If you are a guru, hey, that helps. The method I'm going to give you is going to show you how to do an evaluation, start to finish. I want your new attitude to be, like I mentioned, I'm here to help the speaker be better in the future. All right? And don't worry, your first few times are going to be hard. It's okay. I still screw this up from time to time and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Or I should have caught this, I should have done this. But it's okay. Now that once you start working, after you work your mindset a little bit, you realize, I'm just here for that speaker. Just here for that speaker. Let's start with some of your other cheats that we can do. Starting with, what do we do before the meeting? All right, let's talk about what you do before the meeting. And now this doesn't apply to a contest because you don't have that luxury, but in your normal club meeting, this will work very well. Go ahead and find out what speech project the speaker is working on. So it could be what Pathways project is in. If it's an icebreaker, we want a good spread of information about themselves. If it's something about using vocal variety, we want to see how they use their voice, their rate, how do they pause well, sort of those things. So that can kind of preload the criteria you're going to need for your evaluation. You also want to find out direct from the speaker, hey, what are some things you're looking for? Because I know some speakers, they have habits, and they're looking to break those habits. Maybe they do weird toe tapping stuff. Maybe they do a lot of hand motions, and they just want to cut back on that, so you can watch for that. Whatever it is, just ask them, hey, is there anything you want me to watch for, good or bad? If you have any experience watching this speaker, you've seen some of their habits, then you can kind of take that with you as well and see if they repeat some of those same things. Now, another thing you can do 5 minutes before the speech, before your meeting actually, is if you're meeting in a live venue, and I know I'm recording this at the time of Corona, so not a lot of clubs are meeting in person, you can, just like a speaker, go in front of the room and look out. Because that will give you a kind of mental image of, okay, this is what my audience is going to look like. It makes it much less shocking when you get up to the stage, especially as a new speaker. I know sometimes you get up to speak and it's just like, it looks so weird and they're all looking at me. But getting up in front of that stage, before the meeting is really going to help you out. All right. So now that we've talked about some pre-meeting intel, let's talk about what you can do during their speech. Okay, so the speaker's just about ready to get on stage, and I hope you have some pen and paper handy because it's going to come in very useful for you. And I'm going to give you a method that really, really works. It just really helps me immensely to keep tabs on what I want to report on. I call it the grid method, nothing really fancy. So during their presentation, what we want to do, or right before it, is go ahead and take out a piece of paper. Now, obviously, this is horizontal because it's on a horizontal display, but you can do this vertically and it works probably better. Anyway, let's go ahead and split that up. So we're going to kind of draw a grid like this. I usually kind of save the top 3/4 of the page for the top 2 rows, and then the bottom quarter of the page for that bottom row. Now, in the top left, we're going to put content, then organization, then delivery, then effectiveness, and everything else. And then we save that last bottom quarter for organizing our evaluation later, and I'll show you how we do that. But you're thinking, oh no, what do I look for in each of these things? Well, don't worry, we're going to go into each of these areas in a bit of gory detail, and there's really tons and tons of stuff you can look for. Don't let it overwhelm you. You would just want to watch for the most salient things. Alright, we're going to start off with the C block, or content. And content is kind of the atomic structure of the speech. It's the words that are being used, how they form premises, ideas, conclusions, etc. And so the first thing we can watch for, and probably the most important, is the clarity. Does the idea make sense? Does the story make sense? Are there gaps, or is it just plot holes, or what have you? You can, if you're a diehard fan of a series and you just see they do something in a show you like that just goes against everything they've introduced so far, and it feels like, oh man, you just really blown it. Well, if we do something like that in a speech where they introduce something in the beginning, and then later on it's like, nah, not really. That might be something you want to tag in your evaluation. So definitely watch for the clarity of content. Now, I do want to caution you. In Toastmasters, we generally do not comment on using our ideological biases, right? If someone is a conservative and you're a liberal, or vice versa, we don't get up there and say, well, you're wrong because you're a conservative, you're wrong because you're a liberal, blah, blah, blah. So just don't do that. We're only looking to comment on the words as they're used. Are they effective or not? Okay? Moving on, let's talk about, were these words, were they really descriptive? Were they specific? And are there examples where it's appropriate? I know sometimes we get into speeches where there's a lot of theory and a lot of principles, but we don't get good examples. We don't see, well, this is why you should stop smoking because it's bad and it'll give you black lung, but we don't get any emotional connection. And they're too afraid to describe some of those awful things, but we want to make sure we're descriptive and where needed, specific. So if someone says, well, it's sometime in August, well, why not specify it as August 15th at 4:02 p.m.? Just an example. All right, moving on. Originality and synthesis. Now, originality is just how are they incorporating their own thinking, their own thoughts, their own words into this speech? How are they arranging it so that their voice comes out? And synthesis is kind of related. Now, we don't live in bubbles. The fact is, let's say we're doing a historical speech or we're pulling in data from wherever to support our point. We need to be able to synthesize the outside world with our own thinking. So, if we're doing a speech on smoking is bad, we want to be able to pull in data from this hospital, this university, into our own thinking, our own stories. So that's what I mean by synthesis. All right, what about power phrases or calls to action? Does the speech tell us, hey, if you like this, you'll find more about it at this resource? That's a call to action. We want you to know more. Or we want you to do something else. Like if you know someone who's smoking, tell them, hey, do you know that it's going to do this? Or do you want them to feel bad about smoking? It's just something like that. And of course, I'm inflicting my own bias that smoking is bad. Well, it is, so there. But we're looking for those kind of catchphrases, those calls to action. Do they work? Are they effective? Do they feel strong? Then that's what we're looking for at that point. All right. Kind of related, are your words creating a good emotional connection? If you're telling a story and you're building up the tension effectively and then releasing at the appropriate time, awesome. That's great content. If you're using humor, if you're using other emotional pulls to sell your points, then that's what we want to see. All right. And on the flip side of that is the logical connection. How are you using sources and data to support your points? Is the logic good? Are we leaving out plot holes or something in your story? So that could be something that'll really, they hear something and it's just, that doesn't, I swear you said back here was this. Well, that can break an audience's involvement in your speech, and that can be something you can tag as an evaluator. Finally, just a sample, again, you could add 50, you can add 100 things you want to watch. The idea is you want to first and foremost consider the speaker's objectives, then the speech's objectives, the manual projects. But if they're using handouts or visual content, is the content there, does it support what they're doing? Does it distract from it? How well do they work with that handout or visual? That said, let's move on to organization. All right, so that's content. Now, obviously, you can add 50, 100, 150 more items to this list. And you might find you're going to focus more on things that the speaker tells you about. There's a specific content objective they have. Does this story feel powerful? Does it move you to tears or whatever? Or the manual calls for, hey, are they using descriptive language? Are they using words in a certain way? That's something probably in content you want to watch for. So you can put those in your kind of watch for toolbox. So add to these as fits your style as an evaluator. But we're going to move on to organization. And organization is pretty much what it says on the tin. It's okay, how are you gluing those content items together? Is it feel like, we talked about a great story over here, but it's not connected to the rest of the speech? Is they just going out of order? We don't understand it? Or are these things just masterfully weaved together in just a masterful way? So, to that end, there's some sample things to watch for. First thing is transitions. I'm going to tell you that Toastmasters miss transitions all the time. It's something that almost you can just get them 99% of the time. Now, some people, I'm trying to be mindful of myself, will get them really well. They'll sell that transition for you, and you'll be like, that's that 1% that got it, but most of them will not. So what you're looking for in a transition is they say something like, so that's the data in the North America region, but what about in the South America region? Something like that. Something that will conclude what they said for that kind of subplot point and move you into the next one. Kind of related, connections and callbacks. If they can use callbacks to reference earlier material in their speech, this is gold, and you should point it out so that everybody learns that lesson. So if something that is kind of like a callback is what we call the bookend close. So they'll set up something in the beginning in their opening, and then towards the end of the speech they finally get back to it. So let's say, what did I do after 2016? Maybe that's a callback at the end of the speech. I'm not going to use it, but there you go. Connection is just how are we tying these things together. If it's one long story, then it's usually going to be time-based. Now there might be, we have to step back to this date when I did this, this, and this. But there you go. How are these things connected? Is it spatial? Is it via time? Is it some other method? But is it clear? Does it make sense? Kind of related is unifiers. What do you mean by unifier? Well, let's say they do a speech and it's tied to an acronym. So they say it's, A is this, P is this, P is this, L is this, E is this, and then that's how you get the apple. So that can be a good unifier. Roadmaps and signposting. The roadmap usually comes in the opening and says, hey, if you listen to my speech, you're going to get 3 tools to do X, Y, and Z. And then signposting is later, let's get started with how to do X. And then, now that you've learned how to do X, what about Y? Well, Y will let you do blah, blah, blah. So there you go. That's kind of roadmaps and signposting. All right, how is the support material arranged? Again, I kind of mentioned this. Is it in a chrono pattern? Is it in a special pattern? But also, if you're doing a speech about presenting a point of view, and you want to present the best evidence, how are you arranging that evidence? Is it going to be the strongest first, or is it the weakest first? Now, I prefer the strongest first, and you can say that if they put the weakest first and get to the strongest, they're bearing the lead. Because, remember, the more people talk, the more you go on, the more people just they only have limited pools of attention. I know I do. I can turn on a YouTube video and 2 minutes in, I'm just like, I want to go to another one because it's I'm bored now. Even though I thought it's the most entertaining thing about 1 minute and 30 seconds ago. So you might want to tag him on, hey, you led with this, but I felt like the most powerful thing you had was actually number 2, so put that first, if that makes sense. And finally, if they have handouts or visuals, are they organized well? Or is it just kind of a mess, right? Right. So those are some things you can watch for in organization. Of course, you're just watching for, does it make sense? Does it go in an order that allows you to understand and appreciate their content? And that said, we can write down our content, we can organize it on paper, but to make it a speech, really need good delivery. So let's talk about that next. All right, that's organization, but what about delivery? Because, again, this separates a speech from just written material. Well, delivery is one of the easiest ones to watch for, I feel, because there's just so much that can go into it, and it comes out right at you. And first and foremost is their vocal qualities. Are you controlling your rate? Are you varying it throughout the speech when it's appropriate? So, for example, when you're telling a story and the action's really getting intense, are you really getting into it like that? Or are you just kind of delivering it like this? Monotone, boring. We don't want that. Okay? So, is their voice making sense for their content? Really is what I feel vocal qualities are measuring. Alright. What about visual qualities? And that could be, are they looking like this, or they're just all over the place, or they keeping good eye contact, is their posture good, things like that. And do their expressions match their content? If they're saying, "Oh, I was really sad," and they're like this, then something's not right. It's not believable to an audience if your face mismatches the emotions you're trying to portray. So that's sometimes an easy thing to watch for. Handouts and visuals. Once again, if they have a visual aid or a handout, are they managing these well? For a handout, I like having them passed out ahead of time, but face down, and just mentioning, okay, I gave you all this handout. Please turn it over, because we're ready for that now. That way, there's less people fidgeting with it. If you try and hand it out during a speech, it's my opinion that it just takes up time from your speech, and it's not something you want to do. But there's it's an extra hack. There you go. All right. And if they're using PowerPoint or some other slideware, are they managing it well? They're using a remote control. Do they advance it the amount they need to? And so on. All right. If they have a story and they're using characters, do we get some subtle variation so we know that their mother is speaking, their arch enemy is speaking, whatever it is? Do we get something a little different, just as a subtle visual cue that, hey, this is not me, this is character X? That's what we need to see. Do they have any distracting habits, like, I'm flipping a pen, I'm messing with my rings, I do this. I know one guy, I used to always nail him on this, he had the point. He always liked to point. So that became an in-joke. I'd almost just be an off thing in my evaluation say, I know she had the point again. You know what? This point is just you. That's you, buddy. It was always fun. But anyway, if they have distracting habits or something that's actually enhances speech, there you go. And finally, this is one that it's another one that you can almost get everybody on, is do they pause appropriately? And there you go. When they deliver powerful statements, when they deliver laugh lines, are we getting a good pause so the audience can either think or laugh? If they're not, then we're getting run over a bit. So watch for the pause. It's a very, very powerful tool, and not enough speakers use it. So that's delivery. Let's talk about finally our last category of things to watch for, and I know you might feel overwhelmed. Don't worry. These things, with time, will come to you. And you can always use some of this as a cheat sheet, and I'll have a list of these items over on the site, Saturn Forge Learn, so that you can take them in, and if you see them, hey, oh, there we go. And I know there's other lists that have been developed elsewhere that you can, of course, use. And we'll actually talk about, okay, how do I prioritize this? So don't feel overwhelmed. You can do this. All right. Finally, we've arrived at the last quadrant in our code program, and that is effectiveness and everything else. Now, effectiveness, it kind of goes beyond just the mechanics of the speech, and everything else is, you're going to have those moments where you're evaluating, they do or say something, it just sticks in you like a needle somewhere, and it's like, ugh, I don't like it. I want to comment on it, but I don't know where it goes. And that's where this box comes in handy. You can just put it right there, and if you figure out later, man, this is an organization thing, you can just draw an arrow and you're good. Anyway, let's talk about some things you can watch for in this quadrant. First off is, do they have an effective introduction that they provided to the Toastmaster? And I know sometimes they'll provide it all day long and the Toastmaster still messes it up. Okay, we got it, but the Toastmaster should have that introduction ready to go. And it should effectively introduce their credibility, why it's of interest to the audience to listen to this speech, and so on. We'll do a little bit more about introductions later, but do they have one? Is it effective? Did it raise your interest at all? Next up, do they have what's called a higher you versus I focus? So are they phrasing their things do they say, I want to share, I want to do this, I want to, I? Or are they saying, you are going to receive, you might want to know, or is this something that you have to take action on today? They are saying you much more than I. So that's something you can watch for. I know Toastmasters teaches that you've got to think of the audience, but often in our language we don't. So this is a good thing to watch for. One big thing about effectiveness is, especially when you're doing a mindset change speech, is in the moment of decision, will this speech come back to them and make them think, okay, I feel like giving up, but I'm not going to. I feel like I'm hopeless, but I'm not. I feel like smoking, but I know I shouldn't. So, is it going to produce real change? Now, expecting one speech to do just instantly flip a bit every time, that's a little unreasonable, of course. But does it have the potential to make that change? If so, then we can say it's got good effectiveness. Is the change they're proposing attainable? It's not going to go, I don't like that, I'm never going to do that. Well, that's what I mean by attainable change. Is this speech going to be memorable? Is that, like we mentioned in content, does it have good power phrase or catchphrase, something like that, that's going to make it stick around a little bit longer than normal? And finally, there's just the X factor. Like I mentioned, there's something that sticks out at you, you don't know where it goes. Well, it can go in this quadrant and you're set. So that is your final box. And let's go and let's see how we can put this together in kind of an example speech. All right, so during their speech, you start taking down notes, and here's just some sample things. Like, for example, there was a story about the Little League you told, but I felt like it was strong. It was a good speech, it was a good content item on itself, but I didn't feel it related during this speech. Who was the mentor in this speech? Because I want to know who taught you this, and why did it, it may be a little bit outside, but I'm just curious. Story about Olympics Day. Can we have a date and time? Maybe it's not 100% accurate, that's okay. If you can say on August 4th, 1999, I did this, it just feels more powerful. For our organization, I said he had a great use of parallel timelines comparing you and your brother. And of course, this is all made up, of course. And then the perennial transition sometimes missed. I felt like we went from one thing to another thing. There's one phrase, I believe it's Scott Adams, there was a paradigm shifting without a clutch. So that's what I noted in organization for this speech. For delivery, need to pause a little bit longer. Again, that pausing is something that so many speakers miss. Great energy, now controlling it. That's something I noted here in this. And for effectiveness and everything else, you see that they didn't provide an introduction. The goal was clear, so that was good. And I felt like their ending just wasn't really that great. And maybe that ends up being more about a content organization split item. All right, so what do you do now? You have these notes, and the speaker is done. And of course, on a vertical sheet, you can get a lot more stuff in. These are just samples. I always want to give examples when I'm trying to illustrate something. It makes your life easier. Well, you notice we still have that bottom part of the sheet, and that's where we're going to start picking some of these things. Because if we try and elaborate on all of these things in evaluation, we're going to go over time, every time. We don't want that. We want you to win Best Evaluator if your club has that award. So what do? Well, I start going through, and remember your pre-intel work where you started seeing what the objectives are for the speech, what the personalized objectives were for the speaker. Well, first we consider those, and what we want to do is pick out 2 to 3 good things, 2 to 3 things we can improve upon, and then one of the best or a challenge item. Or the challenge item can be, hey, this is what I'd really love to see you do in the future. If you revisit this, or you mentioned this in your speech, I'm really interested in that. I want to see what led you to make that decision, what led you into that situation, that sort of thing. So let's start doing something that's with that lower part of the grid here. And what we're going to do is I start going through and I start picking out two of those positives, two of those negatives, and then the double positive or that challenge item. And you'll notice I've noted that down here, just little bits that I can refer back to when I give that evaluation. And again, we've already mentioned, hey, we want to consider the speaker's objectives, but we also want to consider maybe there's something they're missing. I don't like to point out really obvious things, and probably the most egregious example is whenever someone does PowerPoint that isn't really computer savvy, they always mess it up. There's always a skip of a slide they wanted, or a reveal they didn't want to do, or the computer doesn't start up on time, or it breaks in some other way, and they know it, and you don't need to really harp on it too much unless there's really absolutely nothing else you can find. That's okay. We're just looking for the most valuable items here that will improve their quality in the near term. We also want to consider things that they can do. So if you know the speaker, if they're new, we don't want to give them, hey, you need to do this technique from world champion speakers, because they're just going to be like, I don't know how to do that. You're going to be confused, and you're just not going to create a really good quality feedback for them with that. So for the positives, we want to emphasize, hey, keep building on this. And for the things we can improve upon, those are things they can improve upon. It's kind of the very next step of what they can do. So make sure they're in reach. Of course, consider the speaker's objectives. I try and keep those first and foremost, then the project objectives, and then the speaker items they're just not aware of. Usually, new speakers, they're in the moment, and they may be oblivious to something. One time, I was in an evaluation contest, and I was not speaking in the evaluation contest, but a friend of mine was. And they noticed that when the test speaker mentioned something about thirst, I picked up my water bottle and drank from it. And she was the only person to do that. It was amazing. So you can watch for just serendipitous things like that as asides. It's great. So hopefully you're getting an idea of what we can watch for, what we can put in and to make it strong. So once you get a feel for it, it's all subjective, of course, but I'm giving you some guidelines of what we want to put in that bottom fourth of the paper, and you'll be able to focus on delivering that evaluation. Now I want to give you another cheat that's going to make you stand out with this format, and it's how to theme your evaluation. Alright, so theming your evaluation. A lot of Toastmasters clubs, they have meeting themes, and that's cool. I love it. It's a lot of fun. Now let's say your meeting theme is races or racing or Le Mans, F1, that sort of thing. Well, guess what? You've got two great things, you've got two improvements, and you've got one best thing ever. Well, what if you said, hey, here are your green flags. This is what you did well. And then you said, but you had a couple false starts, and I know this is not like car racing, but that's the best picture I could find. But here's your checkered flag moment. This is where you took the race and there you go. You have themed your evaluation. You're going to stand out. Now you might tell me, "Oh, Jeff, my club doesn't do theme meetings, or we didn't have one." Well, the speech itself is probably themed, so you can think of ways to do that. Or if there's something in the events of the day, for example, let's say the Olympics are going on. Well, there's a great tie-in you can do to the outside world. Now you've done all the hard work. And the time passes, you're going through table topics, and you're just about to be called for to deliver that evaluation you've been working hard on. What now? All right, let's find out. All right, this is the final segment of how to cheat at evaluations, and it's delivering it. And this can be pretty easy or it can be pretty nerve-wracking, but let's do it. Let's show you how to cheat at this part too. All right, once you get the handoff from the general evaluator, that's usually who handles it in most meetings, but your club may vary, just pause for a bit. Just pause. They should not start the timer on you. Just focus on a specific person in the audience, just like you might as a speaker, and take a breath. It's okay. Everything's going to be all right. Now, I usually think of my opening 15 seconds as opening lines. I want to give an executive summary of the objectives. So, what was the purpose of this speech? According to the speaker's manual, and you can mention that the speaker had these objectives as well. Just make it short, make it quick, make an executive level summary, just so your audience is with you when you start talking about some of those objectives. Kind of introduce your framework right here, especially if you decide to theme your evaluation. Hey, I'm going to talk about the green flags, the false starts, and the checkered flag of your presentation here. But first, the green flags. And then you're going to talk about, for about 45 seconds to a minute, hey, these are the green flags. First green flag, I really like the energy you brought to this. It was just infectious. It was so much fun to listen to you talk about this topic because you just really were into it. It's obvious you've been into it for a long time, and you got to share that passion for it. Awesome. So that's an example. What I want to hear is, what did it do for the strength of the speech? If that energy made it more interesting to listen to, great. That's what I want the speaker to understand. So just make sure you emphasize a little bit about that. But here we want to spend about 45 seconds to a minute in this green flags section. Then we want to transition to our improvement section. So after your green flags, well, you had a couple false starts, but I think we can turn those around in your next speech. No problem. And improvement items I spend a little bit more time with because I feel like this is the real gold for a speaker. I know it is for me. I want to know, what can I do better the next time? I'm just kind of that pretty relentlessly self-critical person sometimes. And so spend about 60 to 90 seconds. Don't worry about timing it too much. You might want to go to at least the green flag or at least the yellow flag here. So in your improvement items, we want to know what it was. Why did it detract from the speech? Why did that take away from the overall power and effectiveness? In your opinion, always make sure the speaker understands, hey, it was just to me. You might want to try. I felt like. I would. Da-da-da. And if you have a solution to the problem they have, briefly describe it. That can be a benefit to everybody in the audience, not just the speaker. So if they monologue too much, they don't get into a story very quickly, you can say, hey, I felt like we were spending a lot of time on setup, and we could cut that back by about 20 seconds, and that would let you stay in time. Whatever it is. So you might want to try just getting rid of this section and see if it improves the value of your speech. And that's an example. Then it's finally just transition to that final best item or challenge section. And this is what you're going to spend about 20 to 30 seconds on in your wrap up. So what was it? Well, I felt like the way you bookended the speech was really compelling. It just reminded us that opening story, we almost felt like we got left behind, and then you brought it back and just saved it in the end. That was awesome. I loved it. Again, why was it so good? Or, why do you want to see this challenge met? You talked about your mentor. Well, I want to know more about that mentor in your next speech. So please, in a future speech, I want to know about that mentor, why they were important to you, and so on. And then you just transition your conclusion in the remaining time you have. So you should spend about 3 minutes to 3.5 minutes, and you're all done. And that's how you deliver an evaluation that you cheat at. So that said, let's finish this off with some more cheats. Easily enough, you can prepare and practice just like an evaluator at any speech, not just your own. Now, I don't recommend it when you are an evaluator because you're going to be kind of confuse yourself. And you want to concentrate more of your mental energy, but anytime there's a speech, you can just evaluate it, and do the same method to get it practiced and just drilled into you. Experiment with different frameworks. You may try, instead of the code method, you might feel like what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt works better for you. Whichever works for you, really, as long as you have a framework to leapfrog from, it just feels like you're going to organize it better and feel better about giving an evaluation than just scrambling and putting lines all over paper. Practice with a mentor. You should have a mentor when you're in Toastmasters. Let them give you direct feedback on your evaluations. And check out books or audiobooks to improve your speaking skills, as well as coaching books like You Already Know How to Be Great by Alan Devine. He really emphasizes how to lead a person from to the very next point in their career of sports or speaking or whatever it is, instead of saying, well, you're here, we need you to be all the way over here, because that's not helpful. We need to get them to that next step and the next step. If you're doing 2 or 3 steps ahead, okay, but if you're doing 40 steps ahead, just something they're just not ready for, that's what Alan Devine talks about. It doesn't help. All right. So those are the cheats. Let's wrap this up. All right, if you guys want more, please subscribe. I'm making more videos in the RDG series. Really dang great. So you can become a better Toastmaster. And if you can't wait for those videos, please go ahead and visit my site below at SaturnForge.com, Extras Learn. You can just go to SaturnForge.com, it'll work, and then you can just click the link there, but this full link will take you directly to my RDG Toastmasters courses, which includes how to run great meetings, how to do all the meeting roles, and then some. Also, how to be a great officer, how to plan meetings, and how to resuscitate a club that's struggling. And I'm working on more, so hope you guys enjoy. Please leave your comments below, and I'll look forward to seeing the next one. And you too can cheat at evaluations.